Hi, this is the third lesson for the month of August, and this is our third fable. So remember, fables are short stories. They are part of folklore, oral tradition, which means they've been passed down from thousands of years ago, from generation to generation. So how does a story thousands of years ago apply to today? In 2023. That's what makes a great story. They are timeless tales. And the reason fables work that way is because they poke fun of human nature. And human nature doesn't really change over time from generation to generation. We kind of have the same faults or flaws. Week one, we did the story, The Shepherd and the Wolf. And what we learned was we're all guilty of lying. It's part of human nature. And hopefully we tell little white lies instead of, the big lies. But we can't help it. So that's what fables do. They poke fun of us, but we can learn valuable lessons from them. Like when we do lie, there are consequences. The second fable we did was the peacock. And there's a phrase even today that we use called proud as a peacock. And it's really about placing more importance on how one looks or how one appears and drawing attention to oneself, which we're all guilty of doing. Even your parents wouldn't need a Tesla or a nice house if they weren't drawing attention to themselves. It's I'm important. So we feel that need for appearance's sake to look important. And sometimes we go too far and draw attention to ourselves. And we talked about that being vanity, the word vanity, and vanity comes at a price as well. So obviously the first two fables, we all have those flaws. It's the extreme when it gets us into trouble. So today's isn't so much as of a flaw as kind of the way we're built. So today's story is about the town mouse and the country mouse. And it's really about personal preferences. So let me be clear. We're all unique individuals. No fingerprint is the same. No genetic DNA code is the same, which means we're all going to have different tastes. Maybe your mom and dad cook something for you and they love it. And you're like, it's all right. Right. And you don't have to like it. Because their preferences may be different from yours. When your parents moved here, they got to choose where to live. I'm pretty sure they didn't say, hey, realtor, pick something out for me, right? They looked around and maybe your mom had different ideas. I want a great kitchen. And maybe your dad was like, I need a great office or garage. And both of them, had their needs met. So let's talk about the story today. We're going to read the story and then we're going to watch a cute little video of the two. Okay, so you should have the link. This is the town mouse and the country mouse. A town mouse once visited a relative who lived in the country. For lunch, the country mouse served wheat stalks, roots, and acorns with a dash of cold water for drink. The town mouse ate very sparingly, nibbling a little of this and a little of that, and by her manner, making it very plain that she ate this simple food only to be polite. After the meal, the friends had a long talk, or rather, the town mouse talked about her life in the city while the country mouse listened. They then went to bed in a cozy nest in the hedgerow and slept in quiet and comfort until morning. In her sleep, the country mouse dreamed she was a town mouse with all the luxuries and delights of city life that her friend had described for her. So the next day, when the town mouse asked the country mouse to go home with her to the city, she gladly said yes. When they reached the mansion in which the town mouse lived, they found on the table in the dining room the leavings of a very fine banquet. There were sweetmeats and jellies, pastries, delicious cheeses, indeed, the most tempting foods that a mouse can imagine. But just as the country mouse was about to nibble a dainty bit of pastry, she heard a cat mew loudly and scratch at the door. In great fear, the mice scurried to a hiding place where they lay quite still for a long time, hardly daring to breathe. When at last they ventured back to the feast, the door opened suddenly and in came the servants to clear the table, followed by the house dog. The country mouse stopped in the town mouse's den only long enough to pick up her carpetbag and umbrella. You may have luxuries and dainties that I have not, she said as she turned away, but I prefer my plain food and simple life in the country with the peace and security that go with it. The maxim, poverty with security is better than plenty in the midst of fear and uncertainty. I actually, didn't take it that far. I took the theme of the story to be, there's nothing wrong that the country mouse liked the way she lived. That was her personal preference. She didn't mind simple fare. You'll notice it said they slept in a hedgerow. That's a bush. She didn't mind sleeping outside. This is what she was used to. This is what made her comfortable, gave her security. And you'll notice at the beginning of the story, the town mouse didn't eat the food, probably looked down upon it. And she only talked about her life in the town, in the city, which means she frowned upon it. This was not for her, but she sold it so well that the country mouse went to visit. So when she actually went to visit, at first, imagine that feast. Sounded good to me, made me a little hungry. But because, the cat and the servants and the dog, she never got a bite. She was fed up and she left. So the town mouse probably was looking at her going, what? No deal. You just wait. You get it when you get it. So to me, I think the message of the story was really, it's a matter of personal preference where one feels most comfortable. For some, a quiet life in the country makes them happy. And for others, a busy city is best. So let me give you a personal example. My sister lives about an hour and a half from here in a city called Boyd. She lives in the country. She has about 8 to 10 acres. They have their own lake on their property. So my sister's a veterinarian. So they have horses and alpacas and pigs and chickens and dogs and cats and plenty of room, right? And with that, though, they have coyotes and bobcats because it's kind of wild. But they have no neighbors. It takes about probably a half a mile to get to their mailbox on the road. So I don't know a kid today that would want that life because you like the suburbs. You like having kids around you. It makes you happy that you can walk out your door or get in the car and be minutes away from friends, from school, from, I know some of you are on the bus, but I don't think the bus, especially if you're in Coppell, everything's within 5 or 10 minutes. So it can't be that long. But yeah, it's pretty close. That's not what happens in the country. So we kind of don't really recognize the country so much. We're more of a suburb, kind of a mix in between. And if you've ever been to New York City, if you've ever been to Chicago, maybe you've been to Dubai, the big city portion of India, it's crowded, right? It's noisy. But some people like that. Some people really enjoy that. I'll give you a personal example again. My daughter loved New York so much, she went to NYU. That's New York University. And that, if you know anything about colleges, most colleges have a campus. NYU is not on a campus. It is smack dab in the middle of Manhattan. You can walk with the other people, normal people. You go through a door and there is part of NYU. So NYU is scattered all over Manhattan. And when my daughter was, 18 and went off to college, I was terrified. She loved it. And New York is not my thing. I think I was worried about the criminal element. She's not. She says, Mom, it's so busy. Everyone, it's not a big deal. She likes the subway. She likes the buses. She loves the trains, which that's the one thing I actually like in the Northeast that they have that we don't have. Because she can go from NYU to Connecticut to, New Jersey to Washington, D.C. to Maryland, whatever. And it's really not that expensive. She doesn't have a car. She's lived there for 7 years. And she doesn't mind that. She doesn't mind public transportation. She loves walking out right now she's in the 3rd floor walk up, and she loves walking out her door, and there's restaurants everywhere. She lives in Chelsea. So the Chelsea marketplace is literally by her house. It's very European, a lot of shops and things to eat. But for her and a lot of young people, she has 2 roommates that are Indian. So a lot of Indian graduates of college go to New York. the job opportunities are there, which is probably why you're in my class in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, because your parents came here and got a job on a work visa. Yeah. Because Dallas is one of the big cities where job opportunities are plentiful. Dallas, Houston, Austin, huge. So cities draw in a lot of college graduates because the jobs are there. So I don't know if you've noticed recently in the last 2 years since the pandemic, housing prices have risen astronomically. People are coming here for jobs. So yeah, they don't love the heat, everybody. It's not about coming to Texas weather. It's about there's a job. There are pretty good schools. So that's kind of the reason we do that. So go to your story elements. We have a town mouse who lived in a bustling city. We had a country mouse who lived in the quiet country. Our plot begins with a town mouse visiting the country mouse, clearly showing signs it was not to her liking. The country mouse, this is the rising action, is invited to visit the town mouse. And when they arrive, she sees this magnificent spread of food. So far, so good. But the climax, the turning point of the story is the cat meowing and scratching at the door and them having to hide and run to safety for a long period. Even when they come out of hiding and the coast is clear, not clear for long, in comes a servant and the house dog. So that's the falling action. And then the resolution here is the country mouse immediately leaves, explaining it prefers the safety and simple foods in its country home. So what's the ending here? You know, everyone got what they wanted. The town mouse is happy where she is. The country mouse is happy where she is. The setting, of course, we have two settings, the home in the countryside and the mansion in the city. And our conflict here is about what they want and what they need. And that is personal preference. If you go to page 4, at the bottom of page 4, there's a definition of personal preference, which is a greater liking for one alternative over another or others. We can be partial to, fond of, have our own personal tastes, our likes, our wishes. So the overall message, in my opinion, is it's okay to have your own personal preference. And sometimes it's what's right for you. I'm going to end with one more personal example and I'll play the video. When we went college shopping, and if your parents are watching this, both my kids were really interesting, and I learned something really valuable. And I tell a lot of my kids, my students in my program I'm helping with college essays, fit really matters. And when you walk on a campus and you visit a campus, which you should do when you're picking out a college, if it doesn't feel right, it is not going to work. And if your kid says, no, I don't like it. I don't like the vibe. I don't like the energy. It's too big or it doesn't feel right. It doesn't work. Both my kids, when they went on the campus where they ended up going to college, they both said, I like it here. This fits me. And that it was a no-brainer. It was okay. It's kind of like picking out a house, right? You just kind of know, and you can't explain it. It just fits your family. It fits your needs. It feels right. Okay, so I'm going to share the screen and I'm going to play the video of the town mouse and the country mouse. Here we go. Very cute story. I hope you like it.
It's so lovely to see you again. After that ferocious feline chased you off, I never thought you'd leave your country cottage.
Yes, I don't much care for the city, but I really needed to buy some Stilton cheese.
The country mouse is on to something. Cities allow for large markets that provide specialized products like gourmet cheese.
You can't buy fancy cheese or much else that's good in the country.
No, I've got Amazon Prime. I can order almost anything else online.
Amazon Prime is a great example of how transportation
Love
and
the dog.
logistics can deliver a wide range of products across America and the world.
You can't sample cheeses when shopping online. And there aren't great specialized services like whisker waxing salons out in the country.
But when I order online, I can avoid crowds. I hate lines and I hate traffic.
The average commute time for a New York City resident is 40 minutes. The average commute time in Montana is just 18 minutes.
I just listen to music when I'm stuck waiting.
Well, I have a short commute and I can hear the crickets at night.
True, you don't have to deal with traffic, but jobs pay more in the city.
On average, wages go up by about 5% as metropolitan area density doubles.
Sure, you make good money, but what about housing? I'd never pay such sky-high rent.
Housing prices also typically go up by about 5% as metropolitan area density doubles.
Yes, but I have the best museums, shows, and restaurants.
This cafe is very nice.
City dwellers basically share the fixed costs of supporting a variety of cultural institutions. Urban density also increases the bump rate, the chance of meeting someone new and
Bump
exciting.
rate, like bump into him.
But cities are dangerous.
I always feel safe in the city. There are so many eyes on the street.
Crime is an unfortunate reality in American cities, but most have become a lot safer since the 1980s. In fact, New York City has a lower murder rate than the country as a whole.
Great, a lower
And
murder rate.
really, the best thing about cities is the endless novelty, the new opportunities, the new ideas, the new rodents. It's all so exciting.
Give me my warm, safe cottage any day.
Okay, but while you're visiting, want to catch a show? You know, Cats is playing.
Okay, so as you can all see, that's kind of a modern version of the story. Okay, so here comes the twist. I set this up as a different prompt, and it was a standardized test prompt. And it just appeared to be really hard for a lot of my younger students. So I made a second option today, and I am open to whatever option you want to do. The first option for your essay was going to talk about, what's life in the big city versus in the country or suburb. And you were going to get to write a personal narrative based on that. So I went through 3 articles that talked about what are the benefits living in the city. For example, I already kind of led to that. There are more job opportunities in a bigger city. But with those, it's a higher cost of living. For example, my daughter makes a high salary, but she lives in a tiny, tiny New York apartment with 2 roommates. When I say tiny, I mean tiny. And her rent is exorbitant. The 3 of them pay about $6,200. Yes, you heard me right, parents, if you're watching, for a tiny 900 square foot apartment with 3 bedrooms, 1 bath, 1 tiny kitchen, and 1 little living area, which is absurd. And it's a 3rd floor walk up. Absurd. And I'm like, why are you doing this? But she loves the amenities. The restaurants in New York, you will not get food anywhere that's as good. It is all these different ethnicities, all these different kinds of foods. And it's a chef's dream to come to New York City and open up a restaurant. So I have had the most incredible food in New York City. They say you can live there for 10 years and not have an opportunity to go to all the cultural and artistic venues you can go to. There's Broadway, obviously. There are museums. There are sports arenas. You name it. Stores. The fashion in New York is completely different from the fashion in Texas. They're about 1.5 years ahead of us. So they will have the trends before we do here. You don't really have, space or greenery. You have a lot of buildings. You have a lot of concrete. So it's crowded. You're on top of each other. It's a little more dangerous because so many people, there's anonymity, there's higher crime rate. However, there's closer proximity to everything. And you have public transportation. You have obviously trains, subways, buses, Uber, taxis. Taxis are big in New York City. Nightlife. It's the city that never sleeps. But then you look at the country. You don't have the noise pollution. You don't have the air pollution. You don't have the high prices. You can get more bang for your buck. I told my daughter, with the rent she's paying in New York, which is about $2,300 a month, I said, you could buy your own house. You could pay your own rent. So it feels like she's wasting income, on a tiny, tiny apartment. Apparently, mental health is obviously an issue in the cities because of the noise, the anxiety, especially seasonal, when it's the buildings and you're stuck there. You don't have wide open spaces or greenery. I mean, yeah, you can go to Central Park, but it's crowded. So yeah, you have less anxiety and depression when you're in the country. You're closer to nature. It's peaceful and quiet. The food is actually more fresh obviously in the country than you would get in a city. You have parking places. You have run around places. I always feel sorry for kids that grow up in a city. Where do they go to play? Right? Not quite the same. So let's go to your essay outline. And there are two options today. And I'm going to be honest with you. The first one's hard. And it's okay if you want to choose the harder version. If you're older, I do commend you if you want to challenge yourself. So this is when it comes to choosing where to live. In my opinion, it's first person narrative. It all comes down to personal preferences. Some people prefer the fast-paced energy of a big city, while others desire the slow-paced crawl of a small town. So then you would say, for me personally, this is what I like about the city. That would be body one. In comparison, this is what I love about the country. And you just kind of tell a story about what you like. For example, I'll just kind of get you started with an example. When I first visited New York City, I was in awe of the sheer energy of the city. It was about 20 years ago. There's a reason why they call it the city that never sleeps. And I finally discovered why. As soon as I arrived, I could feel the hustle and bustle of people busily walking the streets as if they had somewhere important to go. The hotel I stayed at was right on Times Square, which was a huge mistake. This meant there were crowds at all hours of the day, especially late in the evening. And I was fascinated. I love to people watch. I went touring on a double-decker bus, visited the Empire State Building, the 9/11 Memorial, and the Statue of Liberty. And after a few days, I was totally exhausted from all of the walking and the noise and the people. I was ready for some peace and quiet. I enjoyed visiting New York City, but I could never live there. It's not for me. In fact, I felt claustrophobic, like I was an ant on a very busy ant colony. So that's an example of a narrative, ladies and gentlemen, where you talk about what you don't like or you did like about the city, and you can be a little bit of both. And then I will give you on the outline as well. You know, there are things I really, really like about the suburbs. And I didn't make it the country because I know you don't live in the country. I did make it the suburbs. Okay, so the optional basic essay outline is probably what most of you should do, because I think you can relate to it more. And I wish I could take credit for it, but a student on Tuesday said, Miss Hensel, you know, cities and the country are kind of like school and home. And I said, that's a great analogy. And it kind of stuck with me. So by Thursday, I wasn't real happy with the way it was going because students really struggled with, you know, because a lot of my students hadn't been to the city. A lot of them have, but not all of them. So it's really hard to do an essay when you haven't been to a city and understand that. So here is your second option. Here's what we're going to prove today. When it comes to the social appeal of going to school versus enjoying the comforts of home, in my opinion, it all comes down to personal preference. Some student or people prefer the chaotic energy of school. Some kids love school, right? Love it. Others desire the serenity found at home. Let me give you a personal example. Again, I have a cousin whose son is going into 9th grade, and he is incredibly intelligent. And when I say incredibly intelligent, he is not challenged at school. He finds school kind of holds him back. So they decided on homeschooling him this year, and they found a curriculum, and he's just like, I don't enjoy it. I don't enjoy the kids that, you know, they don't challenge me. I don't enjoy the curriculum. The teachers don't challenge me. And I don't know many kids who feel that way. You know, school is a haven sometimes. It's a great place to be. There's an energy. So that's what we're going to do today. In the first body paragraph, you're going to explain, for me personally, remember this is a first person negative, and remember it's true. A narrative is true. I was thrilled when I could go back to school because I'm partial to being in a challenging learning environment and being around my peers. So here's an example that I wrote to give you an idea. Even though I love being home for weeks this summer to do whatever I wanted, I was actually thrilled to be back in school. I'm an extrovert, which means I thrive off of the energy of my peers. Some would call me a social butterfly. This is because I enjoy talking to my friend group nonstop. During class, when the teacher gives my class permission to talk with one another, I'm the first one to jump in and start a discussion. I actually love passing periods in the hallways when I can feel the energy from the crowded hall when my peers are struggling to navigate the wall-to-wall bodies and reach their locker. My favorite part of the day is the lunch, of course. The buzz of conversation and silly antics in the cafeteria make me smile. By the time the last bell rings to signal the end of the day, I'm sad to go home. For me personally, I'm one of those rare individuals who actually enjoys school. Okay, so you get a sense, this is, and obviously your story may be different. I want to know your feelings. In comparison, there are days when I'd rather be at home at school or at home instead of at school, as it's quiet and peaceful. When it comes to going to school, I admit there are parts of the day that are fun, but after a long time, sometimes I just want to be at home. By Friday, all I can think about is the long weekend at home ahead of me. 5 days of school can be stressful. The constant noise of kids in the classroom can be annoying, and by the end of the school day, I crave silence. Do not get me started about the crowded hallways, as trying to reach my locker is a nightmare. Other students are constantly bumping into me, so when I'm home, I'm thankful I don't have to compete for space. Even in all of my classrooms, I feel as if I'm stuck in one tiny space without having the freedom to really go anywhere. When I'm home, I can go into the kitchen and grab a snack or use the restroom without asking a teacher to give me a hall pass. All in all, it's wonderful to be able to go home to my safe space. So I think for most of you who are watching the video, this is the direction that will make more sense to you. And I think you can have more fun. What is your personal preference? At home or school? Do you like one more than the other? And then explain why. Does that make sense? I do think you need to still understand the point of the essay when I compared country life to city life, because it has a real life application as well. There are reasons that people live in the city. And some of it's not because they like it, although some do. It is where the opportunity is at. It is where you can make a career or make a living or be surrounded by like-minded individuals who have the same desires that you do. So it's not simple. And right now you don't have a choice where you want to live because mom and dad have chosen Texas for you, or rather it was chosen for them, which is why I love it when kids travel. You have a sense of the world's a big place and this is not all there is. And there may be a place that fits you better, that, gives you peace and serenity in a way that Texas doesn't. And wherever that may be for you. Okay, so again, this is the last lesson for August, and this is the last fable we will do. So this concludes lesson 3 for summer. All summer classes are over. Have a great day and stay well and stay safe at school. And I hope it's a great school year for you.